So we already have a video posted on a couple of these. Let's jump to the ones that actually have an A value that's not equal to 1, right? I mean, because when you look at this one right here, it's as easy as this, right? And we already explained this yesterday or on the other video. What times what is negative 18? That if I add together 7, that would be a positive 9 and a negative 2. And that's it, you're done. They don't even want you to solve, it's just factoring. Okay, so, but when the A value is not 1, like on number 8, that's where it gets challenging. How are we going to factor this? Well, we have to use that method of converting it to a 4-term polynomial to be able to factor by grouping. So step 1 would be to multiply A times C, right? And you'd get negative 10. And step 2 is to think of the multiples of negative 10 that combine together to give you the middle value, which happens to be negative 3x, or negative 3 in this case. So how could you get negative 10? Negative 1 times 10 or negative 2 times 5? Those are the two options. That's about it. Now we know that negative 2 and 5, when we combine those, it gives us a positive 3. But we also know that we don't want a positive 3, we want a negative 3. So we have the right number, we just have the wrong sign. So we have the right numbers, we just have the wrong signs. So go ahead and change that to a positive 2 and a negative 5, and then you're good for the second step. The third step is to rewrite it as 4 terms instead of 3 terms. So you're going to go 2x squared plus 2x minus 5x. Now notice I left some space between the plus 2x and the minus 5x. And then at the very end, the minus 5. I already left the space because I know that I want to do factoring by grouping. So I have my first group and my second group. So out of my first group, I could pull out a 2 and also an x. And if I pull out that 2 and the x, I will have an x plus 1 left over. Now out of my second group, I could pull out a what? A negative 5. So when I pull out a negative 5, what do I have left over? An x and a plus 1. And then you take a step back and factor out what's in common in your first group and your second group. And of course, that's the x plus 1 that's in common in both. So I want to pull out the x plus 1. So out here, I want to have an x plus 1. And inside the huge parentheses, I have the 2x left over, right? If I pull this out, then this comes down. So I have a 2x left over. And again, if I pull out the x plus 1 from here, then the 5 minus 5 is what I want to have left over also. So my final factored form is simply x plus 1, 2x minus 5. Now that's just a skill. So if it were an equation, if you had an equal 0 out here at the very beginning, then you'd have an equal 0 down here, and then you could split them, set them each equal to 0, and solve. Let's jump to number 21 and 22. 21, you might think that's difficult. It's not. First of all, it's not in standard form. You don't have ax squared plus bx plus c. You really have ax squared plus bx equals c. You don't want the equal c. You want the c on this side, and you want it to be equal to 0. So what do? Subtract 21 from both sides. So you're just going to rewrite the whole thing. You're going to have x squared minus 4x minus 21 equals 0. Now this is a really easy problem because the a value is 1. Right? When the a value is 1, you could set this up and you'll be done. You could put an x right there and an x right there. Why? Because the a value is 1. And we know that x times x is x squared. Now if you had a 2, if you had a 3, if you had a 5, a negative 1/2, you wouldn't be able to set this up, x times x. So when the a value is 1, it's cake. All you got to do is think, what times what is the c value that if you combine together gives you the b value? And again, if you don't see it right off the bat, go ahead and make a list. How could you get negative 21? Negative 1 times 21. Negative 2? No. Negative 3? Yeah, negative 3 times 7. Negative 4? No. Negative 5? No. Those are the only pair of numbers that work to give you negative 21. Which is a pair of numbers that combines together to give you the middle value b? Negative 3 and 7. However, that gives you a positive 4 if you add them together. And we know that we need it to be a negative 4. So we know that we have the right number, just the wrong sign. We have the right numbers, just the wrong signs. So I'm going to change it to a plus, change this to a minus. Go ahead and put the plus 3 in there, the minus 7 in there. And now it's just using zero product property to say x plus 3 equals 0, x minus 7 equals 0. Solve them both. You'll get x equals negative 3, and you'll get x equals 7. And those are your two answers for 21. Most of these questions are that easy. Most of them. But yeah, there's a couple, maybe 2 or 3, that they don't give you the a value of 1. They give you something else. So this is where we have to use that long process of converting our 3 terms into 4 terms to be able to separate and factor by grouping. So once again, let's follow those steps from the other side of our notes, or from the page of our notes. Step 1 is to multiply a times c. That's 2 times negative 3, which is negative 6. Step 2 is to think of the multiples of negative 6. Negative 1 times 6, negative 2 times 3. And think which pair of numbers combines together to give you the middle value b. That happens to be negative 1 and 6. You don't have to change any signs, because if you add negative 1 and 6 together, it really does give you positive 5x. Step 3 is to rewrite your entire equation, but instead of the middle value, 5x, you're going to rewrite it as negative 1x plus 6. So once again, rewrite the whole thing, 2x squared minus 1x plus 6x, and then a minus 3 at the very end. And of course, don't forget about the equals 0. So now you can look at your first group and factor out what's in common there. What's in common in the first group? X. So if you pull out an x, what's going to be left in that first group? 2x minus 1, correct? And if you look at your second group, what could you pull out of the second group? You can pull out a positive 3. So plus 3 is what we're pulling out. Don't forget about the equals 0. What's left over if I pull out a positive 3? 2x minus 1 also. So we look at our first group, we look at our second group. What's in common? That blue 2x minus 1. So let me pull out that blue 2x minus 1. And if I pull out that blue 2x minus 1, what will I have left over? The x and the plus 3. Now, of course, we still have the equals 0. So let's write them the appropriate size and separate them. I'm going to have 2x minus 1 equal to 0. And I'm also going to have x plus 3 equal to 0. So my left side equation, 2x minus 1 equals 0. If I add 1 to both sides, I'll have 2x equals 1, which means that my final answer is x equals, I'd have to divide by 2 to get my final answer, 1/2. I'm explaining this very fast, I apologize. The other answer is simply going to be x equals negative 3. So those are your both answers right there. And like I said, there's only a couple of them that pop out on the homework. There's only going to be a couple of them that pop out on the next test that we have.